Hello and a very warm welcome to the late-breaking F1 podcast presented by Harry Eade, Sam Sage and me, Ben Hocking, here for your first regular Wednesday episode of the year, still in January. Got anything else, Sam?
Do you think if you did the intro the other way around, it will throw you off for the whole episode?
How do you mean the other way around?
Hosted by Samuel Sage, Harry Eade, and me, Ben Hocking, or hosted by me, Ben Hocking, Samuel Sage. Do you think if you ever varied up the
saying
names,
that has messed up with my brain now.
You just can't work it out?
I don't know which way the right one is now.
It's not three people, it's one person that has six names.
It's just six names all listed off in a random order. Right, sure, yeah.
Oh, good.
Great. I'm going to be overthinking doing the outro now.
And I've been...
Hocking, I don't know.
I'm Eade Sage.
It's like the impersonation episode all over again.
Let's never speak of that.
We are never going back.
We'll never win another award because we can never outdo that promise.
We will never go for another award.
Yeah, we've got a one-of-one victory rate. I'm never spoiling that.
100%.
100%. That's how we live our lives. Right. We have got plenty to talk about on today's episode. We've got some comments from our good friend Ollie Oakes, our good friend Mike Crack, our good friend Valtteri Bottas. But we're going to start with something that we look at pretty much every year. So what Formula One has been doing for the past 7 years or so, they will poll all of their drivers and all of the team bosses with the quest of putting together the top 10 drivers of the season. So recently for 2024, all of the drivers, apart from 3, so 17 of them in total, got together anonymously, put in their top 10 votes for who were the driver of the season. The team bosses, all 10 of them, did the same thing. We thought we'd compare the lists. I don't know, just see what stands out and discuss some of the points. So to run through the lists in the first instance, the drivers have Max Verstappen as their driver of 2024, and then Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc joining on the podium in second and third respectively. Then it's George Russell in fourth, Oscar Piastri in fifth, Carlos Sainz sixth, Pierre Gasly seventh, Hülkenberg eighth, Alonso ninth, and Lewis Hamilton in 10th. The team bosses list starts the same way. The top 3 are all identical: Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc. There's a bit of difference in the middle order. So Piastri is 4th, Sainz is 5th, and Russell 6th. So it's 2 positions lower than where the drivers have him. And then there's also a switch between Hamilton and Gasly. So they've got Hamilton 7th and Gasly 10th, and Hülkenberg and Alonso are in the same order in 8th and 9th. So let's start towards the top of the list, Sam. We've got Verstappen, Norris, and then Leclerc in that order on both lists. Understandable?
Yeah, honestly, I've got absolutely nothing to argue about here. Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc were the class of the field. And if you were to tell, you could sit down with me and make an argument for any one of those 3 being any of those 3 positions, and I wouldn't be angry at you. I wouldn't be mad. I'd listen to you and I think, fair enough, you've done some analysis there and you've made a point that I could get on board with. And that's how arguing works, folks.
Wow. Thanks, Sam.
Point, evidence, explain. There you go. You learn it here. So those 3 for me, exactly how I'd have put them. And I don't mind if they could put Norris first, Verstappen second, Leclerc third, whatever way around. Those had to be the top 3. I'd have been pretty shocked if either list gave a driver who was different to that inside the top 3.
Another point to note on this is that every single one of the 10 team principals took part in this. The first time in the history of doing this vote that it was a unanimous first place. All 10 team bosses had Verstappen first. We don't get the points breakdown for the drivers, so we're not quite sure exactly how that works out. But Harry, any surprises in terms of that top 3?
No, I'm with Sam. I think you could fairly have any of those 3 in whatever order in the top 3. Obviously, we went for Leclerc in our awards at the end of last year, which wasn't controversial at all.
They don't put me in that.
Me and Sam went for Leclerc last year.
I stand by it.
You went Hülkenberg, didn't you?
Yeah, we'll get on to Hülkenberg in these lists. But no, I think that's a fair shout from from both sides. I like Sam said, I'm not sure I have much argument with that.
Fair enough. I mean, if you want to check it out, by the way, folks, on our Patreon last month, myself and Sam did a review of all of the drivers. We went from, I think we included 23 drivers. I know there were a few substitute drivers throughout the year, but we went from 23rd all the way to first. It is quite comical if you like agreement where we didn't know there would be agreement for a long time on that list before we had a few differences. So do feel free to check that out and see how our top 10s stacked up against the top 10s here. It's a bit of a spoiler for that. I think Verstappen is rightfully the driver of the season, and I'm glad to see both the bosses and the drivers have got that in place. I would have Norris and Leclerc the other way round. I think Charles Leclerc just about did enough to get second place on this one. I know they were only separated by 18 points at the end of the season in Norris's favour. I just think the McLaren was marginally stronger than the Ferrari for more of the season, and actually Leclerc did a slightly better job of maximising what he had underneath him versus Lando Norris, who on a few occasions, and I do mean a few occasions, he was still great about 8 out of 10 times during the year, but there were a few occasions where he maybe missed a position where one was possible. So fair play to both as well, because I don't think either of them had a particularly poor race all season long, but I would have had them the other way around. There's a bit of a disagreement from the bosses and the drivers about George Russell's position. So the drivers have George Russell in 4th. Team bosses hate George Russell, though. They've only got him 6th. Sam, surprised at the difference there?
Yeah, not fans of Toy Story, are those team bosses, are they? They absolutely hate the sheriff, and they don't want to be anyone's favourite deputy. I think George Russell deserves to be as hunting in that top 5. The one for me that kind of throws George Russell out of that rating area in the drivers rather than the team bosses rather than the drivers is Piastri. Piastri makes that appearance in 4th place on the team bosses list, and I've got a bit of an issue with this. I think Piastri had obviously a really solid season. It was only his 2nd year in F1, and I do think he should be in the top 10, but I don't think he should be 4th place. I think Russell, who had a much more troublesome season with that car, really overcome a lot of the odds, thrashed Lewis Hamilton, came through a lot of bad luck to do so as well. Fantastic job. I also think Carlos Sainz, who finished, 2 or 8 points, something behind Piastri overall in the driver's title. He missed a race. He was not there for Saudi Arabia, due to his appendix not being there. Plenty of Grand Prix himself, was fantastic towards the back end, and was doing it without a drive for quite a good portion of that season next year as well. So I do think that at least Russell and Sainz in both lists should be in front of Oscar Piastri at a bare minimum. I do think Piastri should be further down that list because he's about 85 points off his teammate in the title fight as well. He did have some races where the inconsistencies really showed, especially in qualifying. So I was surprised that he, especially 4th in that team bosses list, I was really quite surprised.
Lose your appendix, Oscar, and then we'll talk about 4th place. Harry, your thoughts on 4th, 5th, and 6th, and how there's a little bit of a disagreement there between the drivers and the bosses?
Yeah, I agree with the drivers with Russell up there. I think there's an argument to say that I might put Hulkenberg above him, but I think him being above Piastri and Sainz is the correct order. I don't agree. I'm with you, Sam. I don't agree that Piastri was 4th best driver of the season. And again, like I said on Sunday's episode, this is not criticizing him because he's only about to start year 3 of his career, but and he's had a great season. There's just a couple of errors in there that you'd say Sainz didn't make during the year, or at least inconsistencies that Sainz didn't have during the year. So I'd have put Sainz above Piastri as well. So as I say, I think Hulkenberg would be in that mix for me, but I'd say Russell, Sainz, Piastri would be my order, with Russell leading the way. So I agree with the drivers there. And as you say, the team bosses clearly hate George.
Apart from Toto Wolff, who will keep on hold of him for as long as Verstappen doesn't want to be in his seat. I think the drivers got this one right. I think George Russell was the 4th best driver of last season. He did a good job earlier on in the year with some, at least relatively bad machinery. If you look at Bahrain and Japan and Monaco, I think he over-delivered on what the expectations were, just based on that car wasn't ready to go at the beginning of the year. And when the car became a little bit more competitive, particularly in the mid-season, you think, I know Austria was a slightly fortunate win, but he still had a good performance there, even if it wasn't going to end up in a win. He had pole at Silverstone, he had pole at Canada. He had a great performance at Belgium, even if the points and the win don't reflect that. So I think George Russell did enough to be fourth. I also agree with your point on Oscar Piastri. I would have had him lower down in the top 10 rather than in this battle for 4th, 5th and 6th, because whilst he was phenomenal in the middle part of the year, going back to the anti-Sonoda.
Oh, come on. She's back.
Anti-Sonoda. The beginning and the end of the year weren't great.
That's a Hall of Famer right there. It's happening.
The beginning of the season was a bit iffy, and Lando Norris had the advantage on him in most of those early races. And if you think about his win at Baku, as brilliant as that performance was, if you go race by race after Baku, not great for Piastri. There aren't many, if any, standouts. He was 40 seconds behind Norris in Singapore. He lost out to Norris in Austin, even with Norris's penalty. He qualified 17th in Mexico. He had a collision with Liam Lawson at Brazil. He didn't beat Norris at Vegas. He didn't really have the pace to beat Norris at Qatar, even though he eventually did based on Norris's penalty. And I know his collision with Verstappen was certainly not Piastri's fault at Abu Dhabi, but the one a bit later on with Colapinto definitely was. So it was, I just think he had two spells of inconsistency that particularly Sainz and Russell didn't have. What about the difference between Hamilton and Gasly? So we've got on the drivers, Gasly 7th and Hamilton 10th. For the bosses, we've got Hamilton 7th and Gasly 10th. Sam, your thoughts?
I'm actually surprised that either put Hamilton in their top 10. This was the biggest name that shocked me here. I thought he could have been maybe 11th or 12th if we were to go all the way down the bottom of the list here. I've stated it many a time. I know there's some slight trepidation on what season we would put there, but for me, this is Hamilton's worst season in F1 compared to a teammate anyway, especially. The performances were poor. He has claimed how poor it was, race after race. We've heard him say, I don't know if I want to turn up for the next Grand Prix. That's how bad it got. The Saturdays were abysmal for someone of Lewis Hamilton's standards. So I know the car wasn't always there. And when the car was really, really good, when it fitted him, he did turn up. You look at Silverstone, you look at Belgium, you look at Vegas, even Abu Dhabi on that comeback. He had some brilliant races, but I could pick up maybe 4 or 5 of 24. It's not good enough in my eyes to be consistently inside that top 7 or 8 where the team bosses have put him. I do think there is some legendary bias, if you know what I mean, some old school bias of his brilliant successes and the way his career's panned out that they've gone, well, it's Lewis Hamilton. So we'll put him higher anyway. And the drivers in worse cars maybe aren't getting the favor that they would have got if they have had better cars. So Bottas, for example, who as a trio, we all have put above many lists because he was driving a terrible car, didn't score points, but was so regularly outperforming that car. So for me, I'm surprised that Hamilton makes either list, but I'm surprised that he's been put up as high as 7th place for the team bosses. For me, Gasly and Hülkenberg should be the ones that are in that fight with Russell and Sainz. Not Piastri, not Hamilton being the next driver in the team bosses list. It should be Russell, Sainz, and then Hülkenberg, Gasly. And if, again, like I said with the top 3, if you were to give me an order of those 4 drivers in any particular order, you can make your case. I wouldn't be mad at it. I might not agree with you, but I wouldn't be mad at your reasoning because, as we've already mentioned, Sainz and Russell, they really had a fantastic season, incredibly consistent, score points for their team, deliver when they need to. Gasly delivers regular top scoring points, great qualifying performances. When the car got better, he smashed it. But Hülkenberg was possibly the most consistent driver of the whole season outside of the top teams, was inside the top 10 of the points for so long before Gasly turned up right at the end. Really outdrove that car, was pretty much the core reason why Haas were regularly fighting for 6th place. They should get a bit more love, I think, on these lists. So more surprised at where Hamilton is and how it's displacing others on these lists for me.
Unrelated, somewhat related, unserious question for you both, because these are all anonymous. How much money would you pay to see Fernando Alonso's list?
Oh, at least £5.
Yeah, many pounds.
I really want to.
Yeah, but the thing is, it would just be him in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. No, he
would
top 9.
Stroll second. He definitely would.
And he's got Papa Stroll over his shoulder, just looking like, what list you got there, like, sir?
No, he's just making himself look good. Well, my teammate is the second best driver in this sport.
Yeah, I back myself as you'd expect, but Lance Stroll is incredible, guys.
Yeah.
Thoughts on Hamilton, Gasly, Harry?
Yeah, the Hamilton one. I think I agree with the drivers. I think he just about scrapes into 10th, despite how poor some races were for Hamilton. He did also pick up some wins and had some great performances along the way. It's just the fact that he had some real highs and some real lows. So I the drivers front, I don't necessarily disagree with P10. The bosses, I don't know what they're thinking there. 7th, no, that's far too high. And above Hülkenberg, I don't agree with, and above Gasly, no. But yeah, and then on the Gasly front and the drivers in the drivers top 10. Above Hülkenberg. Look, Gasly was great this season, but come on, did none of the drivers see? None of the other 19 drivers see Nico Hülkenberg this year. This is a problem with Nico Hülkenberg. He's just invisible.
He is Teo Pourchaire one step ahead.
Yeah, but just made it into F1.
That's the translation of Teo Pourchaire into German. Nico Hülkenberg.
You stop talking random French.
Yeah.
I can't speak French. We've learned this. Come on.
Yeah. Although you say Teo Pourchaire perfectly, ironically. Oh, gosh.
That's the French belt.
Teo Pourchaire trying to get on the podcast.
It just sounds like a phantom noise in the background.
Hit our French quota for the week. It's the gong. But yeah, the Gasly above Hülkenberg doesn't make sense to me. And that's no criticism to Gasly. Yeah, I think he had a great year. But like I said earlier, I think I'd have Hülkenberg up in the top 5. So I don't agree with that one. Don't agree with that one whatsoever. But yeah, we'll see. I know the bosses as well had him down in 8th, which again, don't agree with, especially with Hamilton ahead. Because like I said, I know Hamilton had ups and downs, but it wasn't a consistent year at all. So don't know how he's ended up in front of Hülkenberg. So yeah, this is where this list for me starts to fall apart a little bit. I'll be real.
I agree with the drivers putting Hamilton 10th. I think that's the right spot for him. The first half of the year was solid enough, but there weren't many great races in the first half of the year. And I understand the car wasn't all that good, but I think Russell on a few occasions was able to shine in a way that Hamilton wasn't. The second half of the year, there was a lot of great. There was just a lot of bad in there as well. I actually went back to our power rankings for the last 6 races of the season. And these are the 6 ratings I had for Hamilton to end the year. 2, 7, 3, 8, 3, 9. Like that's pretty up and down.
I mean, just call him Ronan Keating because those ratings were like a roller coaster. Yes! Proud of that one.
Well done, Sam. Yeah, Ronan Keating in 10th, I completely agree with. Gasly from Zandvoort onwards was fantastic, so I don't have any problem with him being in the top 10 and yeah, fighting with the likes of those drivers. I think that's completely fair. I have a slight gripe with the list.
Go on then.
Fernando Alonso's too low. People aren't talking enough about Alonso's season. It was better than people think it was.
It was a bad car. It was not a good car. It
was a bad car. And that's, I think, the point, particularly in the second half of the season. Some of the results he got at like Singapore and Azerbaijan shouldn't have happened, and yet they did. He maximized his points in the first half of the year. I know there were a few shockers in there for Alonso, but for the most part, I don't know. He single-handedly got them 5th place in the championship. So pretty good.
Not this should be a reflection of where he is on the list, but I do feel like Fernando Alonso doesn't have shockers. Fernando Alonso just gives up.
He just can't be asked this.
Particularly in sprints.
Yeah, especially in sprints.
He's like, I'm old. This is too much racing.
Yeah, this hurts this weekend. I don't want to do it. The car's not that good, so I don't care.
Yeah, I think one of the best things about Fernando Alonso is knowing when to give up.
Yeah, he's been around long enough. He knows the game.
Not worth my time.
We go again next year.
We go again next year.
I think they got the 10 drivers right. We're debating the order here. I think they got the 10 right.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
I think Ocon and Bottas and maybe Tsunoda were close, but I think they had the right 10.
I probably would have kept Alonso where he was. Maybe bumped him up one place in front of Piastri.
That's fair.
Well, if you're talking to the bosses, that's good for 4th, so that's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to hang him about 8th.
Fair enough. Any love for any drivers that didn't make the list, Harry?
No, I think you've already mentioned them, but Bottas and Ocon, but I don't think they would have. I'm not saying they should be in, but they're probably on the fringes, aren't they?
Yeah, they never just jump into that top 10.
No, but apart from that, I think it's a very, very fair list. Logan Sargent just missing out as well.
Oh, did you have to do Sargent like that?
Sorry, Logan. It's been a while, mate, but I hope you're well. I hope is he going to be in IndyCar this year? I'm not sure.
I don't think it's looking all that.
No
There's only 1 or 2 spots left, I think.
Is Roman Grosjean going to be in IndyCar? That's the question.
That's another question.
Well, he'll rise like a phoenix.
He always does.
He always does.
Shall we take our first break on this episode? On the other side, sadly, we're not talking about Roman Grosjean, but we do have some comments from Valtteri Bottas.
And IndyCar.
And IndyCar, surprisingly, yes. Welcome back, everyone. Something that was announced just before our Christmas break was that Valtteri Bottas is heading back to Mercedes as reserve driver. And he's also had some comments about his time at Sauber.
He's had a really lovely time, hasn't he?
He's had a great time.
Belting time.
His 3-year vacation is over. This is what he had to say. If I could go back 3 years, I probably would have chosen another team to go to based on what the situation is now. But you just can't predict the future, because in the first year when I signed up with Fred Vasseur for 3 years, there was a clear plan and clear goals. The first year was, I think, great overall. But then when Fred left, things kind of collapsed a bit, including the goals and the targets. There has not been enough stability in terms of the leadership. We now have our 3rd new leader within 3 years. And with each of the changes to the top, it has also meant that key people have changed in their roles. He goes on to talk about how that's basically not the case at the Mercedes, with longer contracts and a bit more stability.
Don't you talk about longer contracts.
Yeah, come on, Valtteri, mate.
You're not one to talk. Why
do you remember your time?
Fair point. Harry, are they understandable comments?
Yeah, I think I think that it is fair for Valtteri to make these comments. It's not panned out in the way I think at the time, and I was thinking about this at the end of 2021, or it was middle of 21. It was announced, wasn't it? And he knew he was going from Mercedes, but he'd already made a deal with Alfa Romeo, Sauber, Alfa Romeo as it were. Then at the time, I think that looked like a sensible move. There wasn't really anywhere else for him to go, particularly.
We'll get onto that.
But it didn't seem like the worst move in the world. And you saw when Raikkonen, who he was effectively replacing at that team, when he joined in 2019, first half of 2019 for the Alfa Romeo team was excellent, especially Raikkonen. He had a great year. And in fact, even in 2020, when that car wasn't very good, it had a Ferrari engine, he still had a pretty good year. Portugal, exactly. But yeah, so for Valtteri, I think this probably looked like a good move. It was going into 2022 when, brand new regulations. And again, that car looked pretty decent at the start of that year. It all went downhill pretty quickly, but I don't think he can have any regrets for that move. If he wanted to stay in F1, I think it seemed like a sensible move. He couldn't have predicted the way this panned out. On paper, the Audi move will look like a great opportunity for him. But the problem was it was so far in the distance. And as he says, they've had so many changes and turmoil at the top since then that it's not going to happen the way he probably thought it was going to happen. So I think they're fair comments. I think it's a case of what if for Valtteri there. It's almost just the timings didn't work out, did they? Had he joined a couple of years later, and was only had a couple of years before the Audi partnership properly kicked in, then maybe he'd still be there and with a drive. But as it stands, he's seen a lot of turmoil alongside a lot of slowness, which hasn't helped his cause. And it's not his fault. It's not his or Joe's fault. But that car's been bad for a while now. So I can understand if he's frustrated. The Mercedes move was the obvious one. He wants to get back on the grid. That seems difficult as well, but I guess we'll get into that.
I think the real kick in the teeth of Valtteri Bottas in terms of the timelines is that he's essentially being replaced by the same sort of driver that he is. Like, he's being replaced by another experienced driver who's been around for over 10 years now.
With less wins.
With fewer wins. And he can just raise his hand and say yeah, I could do that job. I'm already here. You don't have to worry about onboarding. I'm already here. I know the car. And that's still not good enough for him. Sam, your thoughts on his comments? Understandable frustration from him?
100%. He went from being a semi-regular race winner, pole sitter, podium scorer. We did it in our last show that we did, right? We did back and forth. We spoke about the most podiums with Hamilton alone, not even on his own. And he's third most of all time with another driver. That's a crazy statistic. So to go from being this driver, even back at Williams, where before he went to Mercedes, who was considered so promising and up and coming and really quick young driver who could go on to achieve many things, to end up in a team like this where he has to score points, and then before that only 10 points. So that's not great after finishing so regularly in the top 5 of the championship and winning races and titles. Yeah, understandably very, very disappointed. Understandably having to struggle with the fact that he made that decision and he went from such a high to such a low. And I do think his move to Alfa Romeo in the first place was a slight risky one. When he replaced Kimi Räikkönen, he didn't score too many points that final year he was in there. I think it was, in the teens, the amount of points he scored. But he would have been reassured because the second year that when he got there, the first year he was there, he finishes 10th in the title chase. He's got 49 points. He smashes Zhou Guanyu. And that's as good as it gets. It literally doesn't even come close to that ever again. And he has to watch so many other teams and drivers around him surpass him. So I imagine he is disappointed and frustrated that almost what should have been the very top end of his career, it's amounted to nothing. He's had to sit at the back of the grid for a long time watching this big company crumble around him. It must be very frustrating.
It is incredibly understandable. It's 3 years of his career. We're not talking about one down year in a team. This is 3 years where he has not been able to show what he can do. And I reached the same conclusion as you, Harry, thinking back to it. And it seemed pretty promising at the time that he made the move. And the first year, as Valtteri Bottas attests to, was encouraging. You had Fred Vasseur there. You had all of these goals and targets. But it just unravels so quickly in that first season. He was 6th on debut at Bahrain, 6th place in a Sauber, on merit as far as I can remember. That's almost unheard of now. And I mean, if you're Valtteri Bottas and you are listening, and I know you are because you are a big friend of the podcast.
Love you, Valtteri.
Maybe cover your ears for the next 2 minutes or so. After Canada in 2022, so we're talking roughly the midpoint of the 2022 season, Valtteri Bottas, talk about contrasting fortunes. He was 4 points behind Lando Norris and McLaren.
Oh, no.
Trajectory.
Yeah, right. And I know they're at completely different ends of their careers, but what Lando Norris has achieved since that point and what Valtteri Bottas has achieved since that point are 2 very, very different stories. And I'd keep covering your ears for just a little bit longer, Valtteri, because the first 9 races of his Sauber career, he scored 46 points. In his last 59, he scored 13. It went downhill fast and then just never really recovered. So I think his comments are spot on, and there is a big dollop of irony, and I know we've kind of already spoke about this, in terms of contract length, because Valtteri Bottas for the longest time was just given 1-year contract extensions at Mercedes because they weren't willing to put faith in him being a long-term option. And it just so happened every year that he was still good enough to keep retaining. And he always wanted that long-term security of a multi-year deal. And it's kind of cost him here, because if it was only 2 years or if it was only 1 year, he would have had options to get out. And instead he's been there 3 and achieved nothing in terms of on-track performance. Going back to the time where he makes that move, he says there's regret and how he could have done things differently. Sam, what else could he have done at the time?
I think as much as they were slightly more difficult options to achieve, he does have 2 options at this point, and they are riskier. They are definitely riskier. So I can understand how, with hindsight, they look like easier choices to have made, but at the time, they have almost been daft. I do think that Haas get rid of Nikita Mazepin at the end of that year, the year he leaves Mercedes. Nikita Mazepin also is replaced by Kevin Magnussen. I think that was an option immediately for Valtteri Bottas. I realistically think if he got onto the horn, Günther Steiner, have you got a plan in place? I think that they could have picked him up. And actually, what ends up being Hulkenberg Magnussen could have been Hulkenberg Bottas, and would have been a pretty decent lineup for a good few years at Haas. On the flip side, another team that was really struggling at that point, who also got rid of their driver at the end of the season, pretty much, Williams got rid of Nicholas Latifi. And I think that, again, as much as we haven't seen them leap into the top half, they have a plan now. James Vowles is building something. They've got a great backbone to their team. That could have been Alex Albon and Valtteri Bottas long term, and maybe Carlos Sainz doesn't ever end up there. Maybe he still gets replaced. I don't know. But I do arguably think that they would have been slightly more rewarding opportunities for him than what ends up being Stake Sauber.
I was going to say they are the two options. The problem with Haas was they didn't get rid of Mazepin at the end of 21. He did the first test, and then something happened in a country called Ukraine, and then he didn't do any more. So that probably would have been the issue. Bottas was already signed up for Sauber by that point and doing the testing for the start of 22. Williams, I think, is your other option. Look, I can't blame him for deciding to go for Sauber on this one, because in terms of a prospect, you go, they've got Alfa Romeo backing at this point. There's Ferrari links. Why wouldn't you go for that option? And Williams, where they were,
and Alfa Romeo have been better than Williams for a few years at this point.
Yeah, the team that's. I know the result. He made the right call, in my view.
Yeah,
if he was at Haas, by the way, if he was at Haas, he still would have had to endure 2 awful years.
Yeah.
And he'd have just done Alfa Romeo, but the opposite way round. And he'd have had a good final year rather than a good first year. But if he had decided to join Haas and where they were at that point, we'd have called him a madman.
Yeah.
Over
fair.
Alfa Romeo. I think looking back, we can maybe say he would have had a good 2024, but Williams, I think, Williams was the other obvious one, which of course would have been a straight swap with George Russell. Even then, I'm not quite sure the vision was fully in place by that point. If it happens a year later, then I think maybe, but I think they were too far off this whole 2026 idea. And who knows, maybe it would have gone the same way and he would have been dumped out before the time where they got good. It's complete hypothetical.
He basically didn't have a good option on the
No, he didn't. No. I think that's completely valid. Talk maybe of if he can't get back on the 2026 grid, Harry. IndyCar?
Yes, do it. I'd love to see that. I think that'll be a great option for Valtteri.
And for IndyCar.
And for IndyCar. That's no offense to Grosjean and Marcus Ericsson. But
that's an Indy 500 winner right there.
So no, that's what I'm saying. No offense. He's made his mark. But that would be the biggest F1 name, bar Alonso, who obviously did the Indy 500 a couple of times. That's the biggest F1 name to join. That would be to join the series. So yeah, it'd be quite the coup for them. And I think it'd be good for Bottas. He's had a lot of time. If by the time he gets to the end of 2025, if he hasn't got an F1 seat for 26, he'd have done 2.5 crap years in a crap F1 car, and then a year on the sidelines. He'll want to go and do some racing, some racing, and I think IndyCar will provide that. Whether he wants to do the ovals, that's up to him. Grosjean didn't do that in his first year; just did the rest of them and not the ovals. But I feel like Bottas is a guy who doesn't really care too much about that. So I think he'd give it a good old whirl. But I'd love to see it if it doesn't work out for him.
I think a lot of drivers that come across from a more European perspective opt not to do ovals in the first instance, and nearly all of them end up doing them. Yeah. Obviously, Grosjean has, Armstrong has. I think Max Chilton didn't do ovals to begin with. and then ended up doing them. So I think maybe he can look at those and say, I'm probably going to be talked around doing it anyway, so I might as well just do it from the off. I'm not sure.
I think the opposite. I think Bottas is you know what he's like now, his new personality. He's come out of his shell. He's got the mullet and the tash, and he was back at his Uber pickup truck the other day. I think he's like cowabunga, dude.
You imagine the nickname they'll give him whilst he's it'll be the mullet.
Yeah, it'd be something like that, wouldn't it?
Or the bear bum.
The thing Australian, because he's an adopted Australian from Finland or something like that.
They might just go boring and go Iceman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fair.
There's something in there with a peach.
Peach man.
The peach on the beach.
Oh, nice.
There it is. So, I mean, are you in favour of IndyCar if F1's not an option, Sam?
I actually would rather he go to IndyCar. I think he would be great for the series. I think they need another, personality from outside their norm. You obviously get these brilliant North American personalities, some great drivers from South America and, of course, Mexico appear in IndyCar. But I think he would really add something very different. I think he's got a big enough appeal worldwide that he would give them a lot of new viewers and a lot of interest. Plus, as I mentioned, the way he's come out of his shell and he's willing to take the mickey out of himself and have a lot of fun, I actually think America would love that. I really think they enjoy his silly, over-the-top, the mullet, the tash, the silly outfits he'd probably be willing to wear, the stuff he'd probably put on his car for banter. I genuinely think he would add a great dynamic to what IndyCar is. So go for it. I also think it'd be great. The guy is happy to just throw himself into everything.
And I'd be really intrigued to see how he got on, because whilst a lot is made of F1 rejects, in quotation marks, going over to Indy and competing, a lot have been competitive, but none have really gone over and dominated, at least in modern times. Like you think of Grosjean and Ericsson as the two most recent examples. I know Ericsson won the Indy 500, but equally he has not had a perfect time. Like he couldn't compete with his teammates at Chip Ganassi for titles, and you think Grosjean has essentially moved on from two teams in the last 2 years because he wasn't retained. So I think maybe there is a narrative about F1 drivers going over to IndyCar and because, they think they can win there rather than F1. But the reality is a lot more difficult than that. So I'm intrigued to see how he'd get on. Right, should we take our second break on this episode? On the other side, we've got comments from the one and only Mike Crack.
It's a stinker.
Come on.
Less of that. Welcome back, everyone. We have got some comments from the one and only Aston Martin team principal, Mike Crack. What's so funny?
Why is it still funny now?
It's something the cat said, honestly.
Shrek clubs, aren't they?
Ian.
Absolute joker over here.
He was talking about their 2024 season, and this is what he had to say. We delivered below expectations, so we cannot be happy with how our season went. We stayed in P5, but had the championship started in the summer, we would not have finished in P5. So I think we all need to reflect on the season and see it very critically. The steps that we have brought to the car have not managed to improve the car, and there is a little bit of parallel to last year, talking about 2023, in all of that. We have now 2 years in a row not really managed to improve from where we started, but rather slipped back. I think it's a concern because if you've done that twice in a row, it's not a one-off. It's something you have to look at in your system. Then you have to be self-critical. Did we take the right decisions at the right times? Should we have waited with maybe 1 or 2 steps until they are properly proven? Or did we just rush into things because the pressure is high? So it is all questions that we have to ask ourselves. So you've got Sam there, Mike being rather, critical of the team and his role and being, I think, fairly honest with how the season has gone. Would you agree with his assessments?
I would agree with his assessments. I think he's been rightly critical. He's analysed the situation well, and I do think he's aware of what Aston Martin's weaknesses are. The good thing for Aston Martin is that a solution is right around the corner by an old, bald man with the brain the size of Jupiter, because that man can literally see how planets shift in the sky. But Adrian Buchanan and Alonso can finally get off from his shrine that he's got set up in the corner, I'm sure, of the factory. The long-term issue with Aston Martin, which I think Mike Crack does touch on, funny.
What's the guy's name? I don't think it's so funny.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
Mike Crack is being very honest. Mike Crack is being open here.
Yeah. The point he's touched on is that they don't fully realise a lot of their designs. And I think Aston Martin took a bit of a shortcut to success in terms of moving up to the midfield quite quickly. You'll remember that when they were racing point back in 2019, they were dubbed the Pink Mercedes, right? They famously copied a previous car design almost piece for piece. And it looked almost identical to the championship winning car Mercedes the year before. And then they went out and they hired a load of Red Bull personnel. And suddenly it looked like Red Bull designs were appearing on Aston Martin cars. And it just feels like, I'm like a broken record on this, but it does feel like Aston Martin continually don't know what to do with their own car from an innovative stance that is fully realized as, we hear these engineers talk about how the car's in a certain development cycle and they get to the end of a certain cycle. So they go, right, we've got the most out of this one. We're going to take it and go in a different direction. I don't feel like Aston Martin have cycles. I think they just have photographs of other cars that they go, that'll work. Let's try that. And I say this all speculatively. So if any lawyers are listening, I ain't actually saying you're copying, by the way, but it does feel like once Red Bull gets to the end of their cycle, you go, we have to wait for their new cycle to start before we know what to do with ours. And I think that's why they can never close the gap. So once Adrian Newey gets there, I do think we'll see a innovative, new, fresh focused Aston Martin.
I mean, a blanket message for all lawyers. If you do ever want to come at anything Sam says, just make sure that you don't bring me and Harry down with you. It's not late breaking. It's very much Sam's individual comments.
Views are his own. And not
if you agree with him, then we're of the same opinion. Harry, what did you make of the comments here?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think the other problem Aston Martin have had are when they've put upgrades on the car, both the back end of this season, 2024 season and 2023 season. In Austin, they put upgrades on that did not work both times now, which is bizarre. But we witnessed both of them and they were terrible.
Did we? What were you trying to hide us?
But that's the other part of the problem. They may not be able to keep up, but when they put upgrades on, they've not worked, or they've taken a long time to work. So I think that's one of the maybe their bigger problem, to be honest. And I'm sure that's what Adrian Newey is looking at, because there just hasn't seemed to be any continuity from that early peak performance from 2023, and it's all sort of gone downhill from there. It beginning of 2024 as well, they weren't at the highs of 23, but they were certainly better off than they were at the back end of 2024 season, certainly versus the middle. So yeah, it will be a concern, but I think the problem lies not in them being able to keep up. I think they just don't seem to fully understand the concept of their car, which I guess is what you were touching on, Sam, because when they put upgrades on, they don't work. So I guess that then you lose confidence in what you're trying to do and whether you should put upgrades on cars in case it doesn't work. A lot of that will change with Adrian Newey's arrival. A lot of that will change with the fat wind tunnel they've got now at Silverstone, which they haven't had before. Obviously, that takes a long time to calibrate, but that will make a big difference, I think, to their development cycles. So I expect things to change. Yes, it will be a cause for concern for them, but this is what Lawrence Stroll has been writing all the checks for, basically.
It's a lot of checks.
A lot of checks.
Could call it a checklist.
Nice.
Thanks.
He's being very honest and upfront, and he's right with everything he's saying. I appreciate him saying things that I agree with, and not things like Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso are the same driver. He's right, because he could frame this a completely different way and say, hey, look, 2024, we finished in the top half of the championship, and for the second straight year, we finished fifth. that wouldn't quite be telling the whole story, because they achieved those fifth places in weirdly very similar and very different ways. Because in 2023, they walk away with 280 points. Last season, 2024, they only scored 94. And it was just a case of those other midfield teams, particularly early on, couldn't get their poo together, right? Like they just could not put together a...
No one's talking about Mike Crack, come on.
Yeah, I thought that. I was like, come on.
None of them could put together like what they needed to actually, for a full season, catch Aston Martin and beat them, because they were, let's face it, they were there for beating Aston Martin in that second half of the year, and none of them could quite step up to the plate. If Alpine had done the first 18 races of the year, maybe they would have had a chance, but ultimately they didn't. Actually, I was looking back at this. Their 7th and 8th place finishes, Aston Martin, that they got at Silverstone, that locked up 5th place. They didn't need another point after that. That got them the points they needed to finish 5th. So I think that just tells you how important that first half of the season was to just distance themselves from any other midfield rivals, but also the top 4 in the championship, which is never really there to catch based on how slow the car was. And if you look at like how much of their points come from the first half of the year versus the second half of the year, it's pretty eerily similar between 23 and 24. 23, 66% of their points came in the first half of the year. And last year it was 72%. So it's quite similar in both years. So it's something they need to figure out. And I guess the next question, Sam, is do they need to figure that out in 2025, even if it is not a year they're targeting to be that competitive?
No, is the answer to that question. I don't think they need to figure it out entirely in 2025. I think they have so much coming their way that will muck up that change even more. It will throw things in the air and they'll have to work out how that all fits into place. Like Harry said, there's a big wind tunnel that's come their way and they've got...
Not big.
Fat.
How do you spell that?
P-H-A-T.
Thank you. Sorry, let me recorrect what I just said. Yep. There's a fat wind tunnel coming their way, and there's also a fat scientist coming their way with a PH at the start of that. Scientist.
He's not fat.
You've called Adrian Newey old, bold, and fat in the same conversation.
And he'll follow us on Instagram soon, I'm sure. My point is, there's a lot of big things coming their way. There's a lot of things changing, and so it's kind of okay if actually 2025 is the final year of them doing the 5th place finish, but being in no man's land by halfway through the season. If it means that come 2026, all the upgrades they've been working on in the background, when they're put on their car for the start of that season, work, and they understand them and they get it right. So I kind of don't care how Aston Martin perform in 2025. It kind of feels like there's no point to them being there, because we know they are one of these teams that are never going to try and compete for wins in 2025. We know their destination starts. Their journey starts in 2026. 2025 is a get yourself together year. We know that. So I think they're going to be fine with it being bad anyway.
Harry, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's a similar story for like Williams, isn't it? We said it before. As the Aston Martin don't want a terrible year, but the next year again is just it's a hold year for 2026. They don't need to get everything perfect next year. This year I should say. It's all eyes on 2026. So yeah, I don't think it matters too much if this year isn't perfect in terms of sorting these problems out, as long as they've got it ready to go for 2026. Because otherwise they will incur the wrath of Fernando.
And I don't want to deal with that.
No one does.
No one wants to deal with that.
Actually, it would make great content, so I kind of do.
Fair point. I think it is important they solve it in 2025. And I'm not even talking about like actual outright performance, but in terms of this seemingly regressing trend that they have throughout the year, I think they need to solve that in 25, because I like the comments kind of say it's less about the regulations and it's more about the process. And they look like they're going to be really delving into that process to make sure it's right. And I think they just need to have that nailed on by the time they get to 2026. To be clear, like even if this season that's coming up, if they start as the 8th fastest car and they finish the 6th fastest car, outright performance, that's not a great year, but that would be fine in my opinion, because they've shown at least that they can develop throughout the year. And whilst Adrian Newey is going to be very busy with next year's car. I think he starts work at the beginning of March. He can still have some input on the process of this 2025 car. And in terms of like what they're seeing in the currently thin wind tunnel, and why it's not corroborating with what's actually going out there on track, because there's a disconnect at the moment. And if he can solve that this year, processes will carry on from regulation cycles. So I'd like to see them make at least some progress on it this year.
How are you spelling thing?
Phin.
Brilliant. Fin.
Thin and fat.
Hard to say when you've got a speech impediment for me. Fin.
We'll just stick to big and small.
Little and large.
Perhat.
Good.
Should we move on from one team principal to another team principal? It's Ollie Oakes, everyone.
Play the jingle!
The jingle's just you go round in your chair.
How's Trish?
Oh, man. You're going to have to watch some old beer breaking clips, folks.
I'm a roundabout.
It's true. He is a roundabout. Oliver Oakes has got some comments. He was recently on another F1 podcast, Beyond the Grid.
It's at least it's legit, the legit one.
It's just actual F1. Otherwise, why we wouldn't use this quote?
No,
very true. He was recently on there, and he was talking about the decision of Alpine moving away from producing their own power units and instead taking Mercedes power units from 2026 until at least 2030. This is what he had to say. Times change and you can't rest on your laurels. We have to be honest. The decision to become a customer team was in the right interest of the team. And I know it was a difficult decision. I know there's a lot of emotion there because we are proud to be a works team and we still have a year all together. But I do feel that this was also a big statement of intent, really, of where we want to go. We're not here just to be making up the numbers. Doing a damn good impression of being that way. We want to be pushing forward. We're here to go racing. I want to be at the front of the grid. I don't want to be walking to the back. The choice we made was to get the best engine in the back of the car and help the team climbing back up the grid. Sam, does his justification here change anything for you?
Yeah, the famous phrase, statement of intent, really is encapsulated well by selling off major key parts of what is being a constructor in the automotive sport, buying them in from a team that has not seen fantastic success other than one outfit in the last few years, and then basically putting yourself up for sale. There's a famous scene in The Simpsons where Homer Simpson turns up to buy a new car and ends up buying an ambulance because in his mind it says, buy me, buy me, buy me. That is what Alpine are doing right now. They're like, look, we have good intent. Also, there's nothing for you to buy. You can just come along and pick up the team. That is what this is. They're a chop shop waiting to be bought up. And Ollie Oakes, who I think is doing actually a pretty good job in all of that mess, is just trying to keep the ship afloat until someone comes along and buys the whole dock and sails the ship. So it's a tough place for him to be. He's trying to give fighting talk. You know, they were silly to throw away the likes of Ocon, but that wasn't really his doing. Instead, doing.
I wasn't his doing. I
That's
understand.
2 in 2 episodes. Good start.
It's going to be at least 56 of those.
In the next 4 episodes.
I'm doing it. So I do think he is getting the team in the place to be positive, to try and get something out of it, but also to become the best available product for someone to come along and take off the shelf.
I did realise I actually cut off the end of his quote, which says, buy me, buy me, buy me.
Dressed as a yellow man.
Yep. Harry, what are your thoughts on these comments? Does this change anything for you? Have you been completely brought around by these comments?
No.
Okay.
I would like to know if the statement of intent is in the room with us. Because I can't see it anywhere.
Should we get it as a guest on the show?
I don't think it exists, mate. So it's going to be hard.
Is it the butterfly statement of intent?
Good meme reference from the meme lord himself. Look, I would have been less mad with this. I'm not that mad about it. They've done worse, but I've been less frustrated with this if Oliver had referenced the fact that the team that won the constructors last season had these very engines. He could have just said that, and I'd have been like, sound reasoning, actually. Fair dues, fair enough, because you can't mock that. This is just waffle. Why are you waffling for? There's no need. And the statement of intent thing, it's not a statement of intent. It's just, it's a second person to bash their mic.
Sorry.
That's a statement of intent talking.
Yeah, it is in the room. But yeah, I just, that's just waffly, PR nonsense. I don't buy that at all. And he's trying to justify what they've done when it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. And like I said, he could have referenced McLaren as like, well, they did all right. The problem was McLaren had already given up their right to being a customer team before, an engine manufacturer before, because they went to Renault and then they went to Mercedes after that because the Renault was not very good. Ironically, the very engines that the Alpine team have. So yeah, I don't buy this as a justification. I still think it's a poor decision, but they've made it now. So stop talking about it, to be honest.
You've made your bed.
Yeah, not lying
it.
Yeah, exactly. A proper Hollyoaks line there.
That really is. Must be a shout over a town hall or something.
Town hall?
I've literally never watched.
When was the last time you watched the Hollyoaks episode?
Never. In my head,
the Trish Town Hall. It's named after her.
In my head, it all takes place in the 1800s in a town hall, and everyone has flamed torches.
God, you really have never seen it. I understand.
Literally, they have roundabouts.
Wait, yeah.
And small bridges.
Oh, good.
Oh God, I don't know where to go from there. I came to the same conclusion Harry did. Just say that McLaren won the Constructors' Championship. That's all you have to say. Now, in fairness, we don't know whether customer teams winning isn't frequent. It's not regular. So we've got no idea whether that will carry on into the new era. But that's all he had to say to try and justify this position. I just hate the attitude of, it's a statement of intent to run away from us sucking so badly and going to someone else. Like, no, a statement of intent would have been recognizing that your team is not as good as it could be and fixing the issues, not employing someone else to fix the issues. And if you think, well, if we divert attention away from power units and onto other things within the team, and that's how we can win, if that's your attitude, you're not ready to win. Like, Mercedes and Ferrari and other teams have done it where they have been able to focus on their power unit as well as everything else going on in the organization. And they've done it fine. If you're that worried about it, you're probably not ready to win. And I think there's also a point, and I'm not quite sure what the best way to phrase this is, but like, winning is obviously massively important in this sport. But there is also an element of who are you when you are winning? Because if, let's say, best case scenario, Alpine hit the lottery and they hit the jackpot and the Mercedes power unit is great, which, by the way, is another question mark. We don't even know how good it will be. But let's say best case scenario is great and they somehow win a championship. It is somewhat devalued. It's less Alpine than it would be if it was achieved now, right? So it is, producing their own power units has been such a fabric of their organization for years. Losing that means that it takes away something, in my opinion. Shall we take our final break on this episode and play F1 Order, please?
Oh, I can't wait for a Burkow banger.
Welcome back, everyone. It's time for F1 Order, please.
Whether it's a can of Coca-Cola or a lump of cheese, or we're ordering drivers by the size of their knees, this game is full of facts, just you wait and see. This is Formula One. Order, please.
Every time you play that, I swear we had a new jingle, and I remember just how good the original was.
Can't replace perfection, my friend.
So true. Lumps of cheese need to be ordered.
The echoey room in the background as well. It's all perfect.
It's actually recorded inside a can of Coca-Cola.
With a lump of cheese as my microphone.
F1 Order, please. 6 questions in front of me. Sam and Harry will take it in turns to order 4 things based on a certain category that I'll tell them. If they get it right, they get a point. If they get it wrong, the other person has the opportunity to steal, but there is a twist because if they also get it wrong, just in a different order, they lose a point. So, Sam, what number would you like to start us off?
One day you're going to do the funniest thing and you are going to have the questions be, who's got the biggest knees? What size Coca-Cola is the biggest can? And what lump of cheese is the biggest? And I will love you for it, and so will the people.
If you're holding out for me doing something funny, you're going to be here a while. Sorry.
Number 5, please, Ben.
Number 5, 4 drivers. I'd like you to list them based on how many race starts they've had in F1. So you've got Narain Karthikeyan.
Oh, God, I've got to write these down already. Yep, Karthikeyan.
Zhou Guanyu.
Yep.
Logan Sargent. And then the obvious 4th person in this list, Sterling Moss.
Obviously.
The big 4, as we like to call them.
Okay, most to least.
Yeah.
We'll go Zhou, Moss, Sargent, Karthikeyan.
Not the correct order. Harry,
Shucks.
would you like the opportunity to steal?
No.
Fair enough. So good effort. Just 1 out because you had the top 2 in the right order. It was just 3rd and 4th that needed to switch. Zhou Guanyu, 68 starts his first. Moss, 66 is second. Then it was Karthikeyan with 46. And then it was Sargent with 36. But
There's no way that cucumber drove that many Grand Prix.
That's outrageous.
That is outrageous.
He's got
mouldy
2 stints, wasn't it?
He did have a couple of stabs at it. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Couple of stabs at the cucumber. It's a new book name, that is.
Good name for a band.
That is.
Alternatively, it couldn't be.
We're yet to find out.
Harry, what number would you like?
Number 1, please.
I give you 4 F1 news stories from 2024.
4.
And I'd like you to list them chronologically as to when they happened in the year.
Oh, no chance. Okay.
Adrian Newey joins Aston Martin.
Okay.
Oliver Behrman signs a multi-year deal for Haas. Big Jonathan Wheatley is announced as the new Audi team principal.
The J Wheat.
How'd he do that?
Oh,
Pierre Gasly extends his contract at Alpine.
Just for reference, I'm not stealing this.
Still ask you.
Number what was I saying? Number 4. Earliest will be the Adrian Newey one, I think. Then the Gasly one. Then Big J Wheat or Jweet as we call him, and then
never been said.
The Ollie Behrman. A lot of things on this podcast have never been said by anyone. But
that's the first thing.
The final one, Ollie Behrman.
It was a tough question.
No, as if.
And that's why you've got it wrong.
God for that. So there's no bloody chance he's got that right.
Sam,
no.
You have already said you don't want to steal. Would you like to steal?
I'd like to aluminium.
God, that's bad.
Aluminum, you mean?
No.
Ooh,
3-pin plug.
Not getting on that debate.
3-pin plugs.
That's not bad, right?
If it's any consolation, Harry, you weren't close.
Oh, good.
Gasly was first, then it was Behrman, then it was Wheatley, then Adrian Newey was last of those 4.
Behrman was signed because Adrian Newey was in oh no, what was it? Newey leaving Red Bull or signing for Aston Martin?
Signing for Aston Martin.
Ah,
That's
yeah.
a bleep.
No, it's not. I didn't swear. No
English.
No one listens in Germany.
I can prove you wrong.
We have the stats.
Calls up Toto.
He's like, I'm Austrian.
German, but yeah. This is a riveting contest so far. We're at 0-0. Sam, that's you.
Oh, God. And I'm 3.
Oh, it's got early doors. Oh, hang on. I'm not even ready for it. First one of the year?
Yeah.
Poor.
Oh, hang on.
Oh, God. This is going downhill.
Tamer. Sorry, mate.
3.
Thank you to the slug indent.
I hadn't renamed them yet. Sorry, it's Sound 6 and Sound 8. I got mixed up. Don't worry about it.
Oh. This is your under pressure submission all over again.
Round 3.
Right, 4 tracks here. So Fernando Alonso, how many wins he's had at each of these circuits?
Okay.
So you've got Montreal.
This should be Harry E's question.
It might be soon. We'll see.
Montreal.
Hockenheim.
Yep.
Spa.
Yep.
And Silverstone.
All right. Most to least on how many?
How many race wins? Yeah.
Okay. Most Spa, then Hock, then Silverstone, then Montreal.
No.
Good. Harry E, steal, my friend. Silverstone.
Nice.
You can't not steal this one, I think, as being.
Yeah, I'll give it. I'll give it a whirl.
Give it a stab.
It's definitely won at all of these.
I didn't say that.
Okay. What were they again? Montreal, Spa, Silverstone, and
Hockenheim.
The Ben Hock.
The Bockenheim.
The big Ben
I'm trying to get it changed to that.
Hockenheim.
I'll go for most. I will go for
the Mo Farah.
Silverstone.
How many? Put a number on it, mate.
Am I putting a number on it?
Yeah, why not? Put a number on how many?
I don't know.
Oh.
I just think that's the most.
So let go.
And then Spa Montreal. What was the other one again? I've forgotten. Hockenheim.
Oh, God.
Sorry. And then so I don't think he's won a couple of these. I will say next is Hockenheim, then Montreal, then Spa.
No.
Oh, no.
Quite. He's won at Hockenheim the most. He's won 3 times there.
3 times.
05, 2010, and 2012. Then it's Silverstone, 06 and 2011. Montreal, he's won just once.
He's never won Spa, has he?
He's never won Spa, which
Wow,
feels very weird.
That was fun.
Never won a Spa. It's 0-0.
No, it's
nil
-1.
-1.
Oh, yeah, sorry, mate. Yeah, it's worse than 0-0.
I think favouritism existing on this show.
Right, Harry, it's your turn. What number would you like?
Number 2.
I'm going to give you 4 drivers, and I want you to list them based on the times finished in the top 3 in the championship. So how many times they finished somewhere in the top 3 in the championship standings. Fernando Alonso, Jenson Button, David Coulthard, and Mario Andretti.
Imagine if the question was that none of them have finished in top 3.
Yeah, I'll give you a hint. They have all finished in the top 3 in the championship.
I'll go the most times Alonso, then Andretti, Mario.
Not Michael.
No, not Michael, to clarify. There was Button and who else? Sorry?
Button and Coulthard were the other 2.
DC. Then Button and... Oh, no, hang on. Yeah, Button, DC.
No. Sam?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll join your -1.
Let's have it.
It's good to be friends down there, isn't it? I'll also go Alonso first, but then I'm going to say Coulthard second, Button third, Andretti fourth. No.
Gilberto!
How many times has DC finished in the top 3?
1 million. Oh,
5 times.
5 times. Crucially, none of them were first, were they, baby?
That's outrageous.
Yeah,
tip to the post every time.
pretty much. Yeah. Alonso was first 6 times, then Coulthard 5 times, Button 3 times, Andretti just twice.
Gosh.
Which means it's 1 - 1. We go back to Sam. What number would you like?
6.
You can have number 6. Going to give you 4 constructors. I want you to list them based on how many seasons they've done in F1.
Brabham?
That's not one of them.
Oh.
You've got Mercedes, Aston Martin, Jordan, and Jaguar.
Oh, crikey. Okay.
And you can't add Aston Martin and Jordan together.
Damn it! Okay, Jordan, Aston, Mercedes. And who's the other one, sorry?
Jaguar?
Jaguar.
Yep.
Thank you. Right. Most Jordan, then Mercedes, then Aston, then Jag.
Not correct. Harry, would you like to try and get back to zero?
I'd love to, but I didn't listen to the question. Would you mind repeating?
For God's sake, Harry Eid.
I've had a think and no.
I don't want to steal then.
The question was 4 constructors listed by number of seasons they've done.
Right. And they were Aston Martin, Jordan, Jaguar, and another one.
Mercedes is the other one. Montreal.
Okay. I will go for the most Mercedes. I didn't even listen to what Sam said either. This is going to be terrible. Forget the same again.
No, you've always got a difference, so it's fine.
Okay, fine.
I wasn't going to tell him.
You just turn off. You just literally turn their
I did. I just zoned out. I'm so sorry, everyone. I'll go for most Mercedes. Then I'll go for Jordan. Then Jaguar. Then Aston Martin.
You only needed to change one of them. You changed both. Mercedes is right in that they are first with 17 seasons, then Jordan with 15. But Aston Martin, thanks to their pesky 1950s exploits, is actually third with 6. And then Jaguar with 5.
That was embarrassing.
If you put your efforts together, you'd have got a point there. But
Nice.
That's not how this game works.
That's not how the game works. This would be an interesting question.
What number would you like, Harry?
The one that's remaining, please.
I completely agree. That's a great number. What is it?
Number 5.
Nope.
-1 is 4. Great work. 4 drivers. I want you to list them based on where they finished in the 2022 season.
I really hoped it was going to be the 2020 season. Harry can't remember it happening.
You've got Sergio Perez.
Yeah.
Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, and George Russell.
So top of that would be Leclerc, I think. Then Sergio Perez. Then George Russell, then Lando Norris.
Sam's nodding his head. And he's right to nod his head. Good work.
Clawed it back at the end for a 1-1 loss.
I tell you what, you've really recovered that.
That's a nail biter.
Well done, Sam, you take the win.
Woo! Off to a good start. All right. 1-1 lost 1 in 2025. That's good for me.
50-50.
Sorry to say, folks, that coming up next is not the greatest segment in all of F1 podcasting because we are recording quite early in the week this time around. But we'll be back with a question of the week next week.
It's just, what was the question that Harry can remember?
Going to be? Love that. Sam, if you wouldn't mind, until later on this week, getting us out of here.
Recording early in the week. Very good. There we go. Just a little jingle in there for you, folks. Folks, thanks for listening. We will be back on Sunday. What day is it?
It's just seeing your text.
We're going to talk about that off air. Ignore the text. Patreon. Maybe you'll learn these things on Patreon when we do Beer with Breaking, because that is basically behind the curtain. We've also got Discord. The link's in the description. Also, social media, Late Breaking F1, or watch us on YouTube, Late Breaking F1. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll see you soon. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
Oh, I was worried about the outro anyway. I've been Ben Hocking.
Oh, and I've been an old, bold, fat man.
How do you spell fat?
PH.
Keep regulate.
Christ.